The Galactic High Council chamber filled slowly, but the silence carried more weight than any debate ever had. Delegates moved with restrained urgency, their movements clipped and uneasy, as if each one feared being the last to understand a danger everyone sensed but no one could name. The enormous chamber, usually alive with heated argument, felt hollow, as though the air itself had withdrawn to a safe distance. The chair stood at the central podium, hands clasped behind their back, eyes locked on the holographic star map floating above them. A single system pulsed red at the outer edge of council space. It wasn't a war zone. It wasn't contested territory. It was simply blank. Where records once displayed an active, thriving mid-tier empire, there was now only an unresponsive void. No signals, no transport signatures, no debris fields. It was as if reality had failed to load that region of space. Whispers surged through the delegates, not about what was missing, but how it had disappeared. Empires could fall. Fleets could be destroyed. But erasure, total systemic removal, violated every rule of warfare, physics, and common sense. Nothing in galactic history suggested such precision. The chair tapped the console, amplifying their voice. "We have summoned you because an unprecedented anomaly has occurred. The Vorga Dominion has ceased to exist in every detectable measure. Long-range scans find no infrastructure, no orbital remains, no quantum archives. We cannot locate even fragmented code. This is not conquest. This is deletion." The word triggered an immediate reaction. Delegates stiffened, mandibles clicked, bioluminescent patterns flickered in distress. Deletion implied intent, capability, and an entity willing to execute such a strategy with no hesitation. A representative from the Keth Alliance stood abruptly. "Dominions do not vanish. They fight to the last cruiser. Who possesses the means to make them disappear without a trace?" Another voice cut through. "We received border reports. The Vorga initiated a conflict with a new species. Primitive-looking ships. Small population footprint. Biological unknowns. They called themselves humans." At that, the chamber shifted from fear to raw disbelief. The species' name had floated through diplomatic channels for only a short time, mentioned briefly in exploration logs and minor contact reports. Nothing suggested they were a military threat. Their technology registered as asymmetrical, difficult to categorize, and inconsistent across different encounters. Most assumed they were transitional, somewhere between industrial and early fusion stage. No empire believed they posed danger to anyone beyond isolated skirmishes. "Humans?" the chair repeated. "Explain why this matters." The Keth representative accessed a small datapad. "A Vorga scout vessel transmitted a partial intelligence packet before contact was lost. According to the data, humans issued a warning after a border incursion. The Dominion disregarded it. Within a cycle, human retaliation began. Except the packet states no fleet movement, no orbital bombardment, and no occupation was observed. The Vorga described the response as methodical neutralization. After that, transmissions halted. The word neutralization unsettled even the hardened species. Traditional warfare required attrition. Victory required force. Neutralization implied something cleaner, something absolute. A representative from the Zath collective leaned forward, voice low. "What are the chances this species developed a superweapon?" "Unable to determine," the chair answered. "What we do know is that one of our remote probes detected a faint distress beacon on the outskirts of the erased region. A single escaped craft. We have retrieved it. Its occupant claims to be the last surviving Vorga commander." Murmurs surged, but it wasn't anticipation, it was dread. "He is unstable," the chair continued. "But his message is consistent. He states the humans did not invade. They did not cripple fleets. They did not overrun colonies. According to him, they identified key systems, dismantled them with surgical accuracy, and removed every element required for the Dominion to function. Not destroyed, removed. As though extracting poison from a wound." The chamber fell silent again, deeper than before. Delegates exchanged glances, each calculating implications. A species capable of erasing an empire with efficiency surpassing annihilation posed a threat unlike any encountered. The chair concluded, voice steady but strained. We face an adversary whose methodology defies classification. They do not wage war. They invalidate it. Today, we begin understanding what humanity truly is, and what they intend for this galaxy. The silence that followed held more fear than any declaration of war ever had. The chamber dimmed as the survivor was brought forward, his posture rigid yet fragile, like he expected the walls themselves to collapse at any moment. His uniform hung loosely, scorched in places where emergency seals had failed. Even the less empathetic species recognized the look of someone who had witnessed something beyond war, someone whose mind was still trying to reconcile what he escaped. He spoke without greeting. We underestimated them because we misunderstood them. His voice wavered, but the words carried weight far heavier than fear. Humans ignore the idea of conflict escalation. They do not measure war by destruction or casualties. They see conflict as a problem that must be prevented from recurring. When diplomacy fails, they don't retaliate. They eliminate the capacity for hostility in its entirety. Delegates shifted uncomfortably as he continued. Our Dominion initiated what we believed was a manageable border test. We expected negotiation or counterstrikes. Humans responded first with messages, not weapons. They demanded justification for our intrusion. When we dismissed their warning, they analyzed us. He paused, eyes distant. Not our fleet strength, not our troop count, our behavior, our structure, the systems that enabled us to act aggressively. He explained how the humans used small, unassuming vessels to infiltrate communication relays without triggering defensive protocols. They didn't jam signals, they replaced them with perfect replicas, gradually redirecting military orders into loops so subtle commanders didn't detect the interference. Fleet mobilizations froze in position. Supply routes severed themselves through automated rerouting that appeared routine. Defense grids slipped offline as maintenance cycles were overwritten with authentic authorization codes. There were no explosions, he whispered. No battles. No alarms. Systems that held our empire together simply stopped acknowledging us. Confusion replaced resistance as entire sectors went dark, not from attack, but from the absence of operational infrastructure. Drones failed to receive commands. Stations couldn't authenticate their own leadership. Shipyards lost access to design blueprints. Even cultural databases, recordings, histories, ideological training programs, were removed from their archives with surgical precision, leaving empty frameworks where identities once existed. The survivor's hands trembled as he described human nanite swarms, not the destructive type known across the galaxy, but algorithmic entities that sought patterns instead of matter. They infiltrated hardware layers, isolating hostile logic and erasing it without damaging the surrounding structure. They dismantled aggression like surgeons removing malignant tissue, leaving no debris and no path for reconstruction. They studied us faster than we could react, he said, voice thinning. Every time we attempted a countermeasure, they removed the process that enabled it. When we tried to assemble emergency fleets manually, manufacturing algorithms vanished. When commanders attempted to broadcast rallying signals, the transmission framework dissolved. It was as if our empire was made of threads, and humans simply pulled each one with precision. The council listened in stillness as he explained the final stage. Human vessels appeared only after the Dominion had already collapsed internally. They didn't attack. They didn't even announce themselves. They transmitted a single statement across what remained of the Dominion network. Hostility neutralized. Do not repeat. The survivor inhaled sharply, the memory clearly consuming him. They spared civilians. They left colonies intact. They could have destroyed us. They chose instead to disable every function that allowed us to act violently. We weren't defeated. We were rendered irrelevant. A delegate asked how he survived. His answer chilled the chamber. They allowed me to leave. One vessel escorted my escape craft to the border and transmitted coordinates for a safe route. They wanted me to deliver a message: humans do not conduct wars. They conduct corrections. He met the council's eyes one by one. You must understand. They are not conquerors. They are problem solvers who refuse to let a threat remain a threat. If you harm what they value, they won't retaliate. They'll remove your ability to do it again. Entirely. The chamber absorbed his final words with somber clarity. We thought war required violence. Humans proved it only requires certainty. Silence held the chamber as the human transmission initiated. The holographic projection formed slowly, not with theatrical flair, but with an understated precision that suggested absolute control over the environment. The figure that appeared was humanoid yet deliberately faceless, a smooth, featureless outline that gave no cultural cues, no emotional hints, no vulnerabilities. The lack of identifiable traits made every delegate unsure whether they were seeing a single representative or a carefully curated avatar designed to prevent any psychological advantage. A calm voice emerged, modulated at a neutral frequency that transcended species acoustics. We acknowledge your inquiry. We will clarify our position. The delivery contained no arrogance, no defensiveness, just an unnerving steadiness that implied complete preparedness. The faceless figure proceeded. Your records indicate confusion regarding recent events. You assume the disappearance of an empire implies conquest. Conquest is inefficient. It cultivates resentment and encourages cycles of retaliation. We have no interest in managing populations or controlling territory. Our objective was to halt destructive behavior aimed at us and those we protect. Delegates exchanged subtle glances as the representative continued, each word sharpening the growing realization that humans operated on a framework none of them had ever encountered. The voice remained level. When the Vorga Dominion initiated hostilities, we identified their aggression as systemic, not situational. Such behavior persists even when leaders change. Addressing it required removing the structures that enable it. We targeted command chains, military infrastructures, and hostile algorithms. Lives were not the objective, capability was. A delegate raised a protest about sovereignty, but the human responded instantly, revealing they had analyzed council protocols in real time. We do not violate sovereignty. We eliminate pathways to violence. If those pathways define a civilization's identity, then restructuring is inevitable for the safety of all involved. The hologram shifted slightly, not for emphasis, but as if recalibrating to keep the entire chamber under observation. Understand that we do not act impulsively. Before intervention, we exhaust diplomatic channels. We evaluate behavior patterns, historical tendencies, communication logs, and psychological markers. When all indicators confirm that a species will continue aggression regardless of mediation, we take corrective measures. What unsettled the council most was not the technological superiority implied, but the strategic clarity. Humans were not boasting. They were explaining a method perfected through deliberate, dispassionate reasoning. The voice resumed with the same unwavering cadence. We avoid destruction of cultural knowledge unrelated to hostility. We preserve civilian networks, medical systems, educational archives, and essential infrastructure. Removing aggression does not require harming populations. It requires eliminating the mechanisms that sustain harmful intent. Several delegates stiffened as the projection highlighted a map of the Dominion's network architecture, displaying the precise nodes humans had neutralized. The accuracy left no room for interpretation. Every point corresponded to a decision chain that enabled hostile action. The humans had mapped an entire empire not as territory, but as a series of behavioral equations. We do not wish to rule, the representative said. We seek stability. If peace demands we intervene, we do so with finality. There was no threat in the statement, yet the implications weighed heavier than any declaration of war. The faceless figure addressed the council directly. We are not unpredictable. Our principles are documented. We value autonomy, cooperation, and coexistence. Attack us, and we will remove your ability to attack. Collaborate with us, and we become reliable partners. Ignore us, and we leave you in peace. What struck the delegates hardest was that humans had no visible pride in their actions. They spoke as if describing a routine maintenance protocol, not the dismantling of an empire. A civilization capable of such precision, while remaining emotionally detached, was more threatening than any conqueror driven by rage or ambition. The transmission neared its conclusion. We attend this session not to intimidate, but to clarify. Our presence in this galaxy does not alter its balance unless hostility forces us to act. We do not erase species. We erase the conditions that create conflict. The hologram dimmed, leaving the council suspended in a tension thicker than before. The humans had revealed everything necessary to understand them, yet the simplicity of their logic made them more alien than any species the council had ever encountered. The moment the human transmission ended, the chamber erupted in a restrained storm of controlled panic. Delegates spoke in low, urgent tones, each one trying to measure the implications without exposing fear. The council had faced planet breakers, star-consuming anomalies, and ideological fanatics, but none produced the quiet dread now spreading across the room. Humans had not threatened anyone, yet their logic alone rattled every assumption the galaxy held about safety, power, and autonomy. A representative from a militaristic species broke the uneasy murmuring with a firm declaration. We cannot permit a species with this level of intervention capability to operate unchecked. They dismantle the Dominion without firing a shot. If they decide the Council itself poses a risk, what prevents them from doing the same to us? Their voice showed resolve, but the edges carried uncertainty. Another delegate responded sharply. Attempting aggression against a species that can predict and disable an empire's infrastructure is suicide. They would see the attack forming before we executed it. They would treat it as another behavioral correction, and the Council would vanish from its own records. A third delegate interjected with measured calm. They spared every civilian. They left colonies intact. Their intervention, however unsettling, was precise. Their objective was to neutralize aggression, not expand territory. We must consider that their method, though terrifying, prevented a full-scale war. The debate intensified as each faction projected its own fear or admiration. War-oriented species felt their foundational beliefs collapsing. Diplomatic species saw opportunity in a power that preferred nonviolent solutions. Pragmatic species struggled to comprehend the efficiency humans viewed as baseline logic. The Council's analytical division presented their assessment. Human predictive algorithms infiltrated our observation systems during their transmission. Not maliciously, merely to verify we were not preparing a hostile response. They left no residue. Their presence was detectable only because they allowed it. Delegates shuddered at the implication. Humans could monitor any system, anywhere, and none of them would know unless humanity wanted them to. A veteran strategist leaned forward, his voice heavy with reluctant respect. They don't overpower enemies. They remove the foundation of conflict. Every strategy we've refined across centuries relies on visible deterrents, fleets, shields, alliances. Humans ignore physical confrontation entirely. They calculate the root cause and erase it before the fight begins. No species prepared for conventional warfare can counter that approach. A younger delegate, visibly shaken, posed the question that no one wanted to voice. If the Council passes a policy they consider dangerous, would they correct us the same way? The chamber froze. That possibility hadn't been openly acknowledged, yet everyone had already considered it. A species capable of dissecting an empire's behavior within days would not hesitate to intervene if they believed the galaxy was steering toward destructive patterns. But another representative countered with unexpected confidence. Humans made their boundaries clear. They do not interfere unless attacked or forced into defensive action. They show no interest in governance. They left the Vorga territories untouched once the hostile system collapsed. They didn't impose rule. They removed only the machinery of aggression. We should evaluate their consistency instead of projecting our fears. The strategist agreed. Their actions followed a strict ethical logic. They responded only after repeated diplomatic attempts failed. They neutralized military infrastructure, not lives. Their conduct suggests stability, not expansionism. The Council's chair finally intervened, restoring order with deliberate calm. We must recognize a difficult truth: humanity's arrival introduces a new paradigm. Our existing doctrines assume conflict is natural and inevitable. Humans operate under a different assumption: that conflict is a solvable equation. Their method is absolute, but it is predictable if we respect their thresholds. A final assessment closed the discussion. We are not dealing with conquerors. We are dealing with a species that refuses to tolerate cycles of aggression. Our challenge is to adapt before our outdated doctrines bring unnecessary consequences. The chamber quieted, each delegate fully aware that the galaxy had crossed an invisible line. Humanity had not asked for authority, yet their existence forced every civilization to reconsider what power meant, and what survival required. The council reconvened after hours of tense deliberation, each delegate weighed down by the realization that the galaxy they knew was already obsolete. No one spoke until the chair initiated the final agenda, the decision that would define the future order of the stars. The vote required clarity, not courage, yet every representative felt as though they were stepping into unfamiliar gravity. The first motion addressed war doctrine. Centuries of precedent assumed conflict was inevitable and required fleets, fortified borders, and rapid escalation protocols. Those assumptions had collapsed the moment humans revealed how effortlessly those structures could be nullified. The Council voted with overwhelming agreement to dismantle aggressive expansion policies and replace them with strict non-provocation mandates. Military actions would now require collective approval to ensure no single species could drag the galaxy into a confrontation humans would perceive as hostile. The next decision centered on enforcement. Anxious voices feared that involving humans would invite dependency, but the opposing view argued that ignoring their capabilities would be reckless. Humans were not applying for a position. They did not want seats, territories, or political leverage. They had demonstrated a consistent pattern. Intervention occurred only when aggression forced their hand. This reliability, unsettling as it was, made them uniquely suited to shaping a new era of deterrence. The Council reached a consensus to request human cooperation, not authority. The wording reflected the galaxy's desire to avoid provoking or empowering them unnecessarily. They would be advisors, not rulers. Their methods would guide the reform of conflict prevention technologies, defensive protocols, and interstellar communication ethics. None doubted that humans already knew this decision was imminent. Their predictive systems likely mapped the discussion before the first vote. Messages were transmitted to the human diplomatic network, and the reply arrived within minutes, as if prepared beforehand. The human response was brief. We accept collaboration. We require no jurisdiction. We expect only transparency and shared efforts. Our goal is stability. The clarity of their acceptance reassured some and unnerved others, but the lack of demands confirmed their intentions. They were not expanding influence. They were eliminating variables that threatened long-term peace. As the integration process began, species hostile by nature found their doctrines incompatible with the new standard. Empires built on conquest discovered their influence fading as the Council enforced strict oversight, and former aggressors realized any attempt to reclaim old practices risked attracting human scrutiny. The memory of the Dominion's disappearance served as a constant warning, though the Council never stated this aloud. Fear was not policy, but fear shaped behavior more effectively than any treaty. Gradually, stability took root. Trade routes expanded without fear of raids. Border conflicts dropped to negligible levels. The Council's Analytics Division noted an unprecedented decline in weapons development as species redirected resources toward infrastructure, science, and cultural projects. No one credited humanity openly, but every delegate knew the truth. Peace existed because no one wanted to test the limits of human tolerance. Behind closed doors, leaders admitted what they would never state publicly. The galaxy's peace endured not because everyone embraced morality, but because everyone understood that a single act of aggression could invite absolute correction. Even species historically opposed to cooperation began proposing joint ventures with humans, hoping proximity offered protection rather than scrutiny. The final transformation was ideological. Younger generations across multiple civilizations grew up hearing stories of humans, not as tyrants or saviors, but as the species that forced the galaxy to abandon its destructive habits. Their influence didn't stem from fear alone. It came from a quiet respect for a civilization that refused to treat war as destiny. The Council archived its final report on the crisis. The closing statement summarized what every species had learned, though none dared phrase it so directly. The galaxy did not become peaceful because it evolved. It became peaceful because it encountered a species that viewed conflict as an error to be corrected, not a theater for glory. The era that followed was the most stable the Council had ever recorded. Diplomacy flourished, alliances strengthened, and long-standing grudges dissolved under the pressure of a new standard. Not one battle scarred the star charts in the years that followed. Humanity never claimed credit. They never sought acknowledgement. Their legacy formed quietly, woven into every policy and safeguard. And though the Council rarely spoke of it, every civilization understood the same truth: peace prevailed because humans demanded accountability, and the galaxy, finally, chose to listen.